Tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone.
Our study on AI. We've got a few witnesses with us here in the first hour, and then we're going to have a few more in the second hour. So joining us from the Center for Designing Change, we have Kubir Colin Singh Dillon, who is the Executive Director. From Inc. Law, we have Carol Biovizen, who is the Managing Partner. And from Oracle, we have Hamza Jahangar, who is the Vice President, AI Solution Engineering. So welcome to you all. Thanks for being here.
I can confirm that all the tests have been taken and been made to ensure AI.
But if you're not using your earpiece, but it's plugged in, to please just make sure that it's placed on the sticker in front of you. That's to protect the health and well-being of our interpreters. So witnesses, you'll have upwards of 5 minutes for an introductory remark, followed by which there will be a line of questioning from the members representing the various political parties around the table. With that, Mr. Jahangar, I'm going to turn the floor to you. You have upwards of 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Honorable Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today as part of your study on artificial intelligence. I'm here on behalf of Oracle Canada. We provide cloud infrastructure, data platforms, and AI capabilities used by governments and regulated industries. In Canada, we support public and private sector organizations, including SMEs, to adopt AI in ways that are secure, compliant, and operationally practical. For over 45 years, Oracle has supported the Canadian public sector, including federal and all provincial and territorial governments. Throughout Canada, Oracle Technologies supports citizen services, finance, human resources, education, government operations, defense, intelligence, and public safety. AI is now a core driver of productivity and service delivery, from improving manufacturing and construction outcomes to strengthening cybersecurity and reducing administrative burden in the public sector. Realizing these benefits, however, depends on deploying AI with strong safeguards, transparency, and accountability. From our perspective, 3 priorities matter most for Canada: trusted data foundations, sovereignty and security by design, and enabling adoption at scale across Canadian organizations. So first, trusted data foundations. AI outcomes are only as strong as the data behind them. In many organizations, data remains fragmented, limiting reliability and increasing risk. Canada should prioritize policies and investments that enable secure data integration, strong governance, and auditability, particularly for high-impact use cases. Organizations need to bring AI into governed data environments with clear, enforceable controls. Who can access data, how it is used, and how decisions can be tracked and audited. This level of traceability and oversight is essential for critical services and regulated sectors where accountability, risk management, and public trust are paramount. Second, the sovereignty and security by design. Data protection and control are central concerns for Canadians and for this committee. Oracle already operates cloud regions in Canada, in Toronto and Montreal, supporting customers that require data residency and compliance with Canadian requirements. We also provide higher assurance deployment models, including dedicated and sovereign cloud options, designed to meet specific regulatory and national security needs through stronger operational control, segregation, and compliance. In practical terms, sovereignty must be grounded in verifiable safeguards, strong encryption, robust identity and access management, clear separation of duties, and comprehensive auditability. Additional capabilities such as confidential computing can further protect sensitive data while it is in use. As Canada considers its policy approach, we would encourage a focus on measurable security outcomes and enforceable standards, ensuring that sovereignty is demonstrated in practice, not just defined in principle. Third, enabling adoption at scale, especially for SMEs. While Canada has strong AI research capacity, adoption remains uneven. Many organizations, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, face barriers related to cost, skills, and procurement complexity. Oracle works with Canadian organizations to modernize data platforms and deploy AI securely, including through partner-led models that help businesses adopt cloud and AI with the controls required in regulated environments. Expanding skills development and certification pathways will also be critical to building the workforce needed to scale adoption across regions and throughout the supply chain. In closing, Canada is well positioned to lead in responsible AI. Doing so will require a balanced approach, strengthening trust, advancing sovereignty, and enabling practical adoption at scale. Oracle stands ready to support this committee's work by sharing technical expertise and real-world implementation experience. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, sir. Ms. Piovesan, we'll turn the floor to you. You'll have upwards of 5 minutes.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable members of this committee. As you heard, my name is Carol Piovesan. I am the co-founder and managing partner at Inc. Law, where we advise clients on privacy, data governance, and AI risk management, among other practices of law. I've previously appeared before this committee and before the Ethics Committee. I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Toronto Faculty of Law, where I teach on AI regulation. And I want to be clear that the opinions I share today are my own. For the current study undertaken by this committee on data sovereignty, AI adoption, and strategic industrial sectors in Canada, I offer 3 recommendations. The first is to modernize federal privacy law. Modernizing Canada's federal privacy law is something this committee has heard multiple times from multiple witnesses. It is long overdue, and it is an important step in Canada's strategy for data sovereignty. Though technology neutral, PIPEDA in its current form was not designed for such sophisticated data processing activities nor processing technologies as AI. AI systems are collecting, inferring, profiling, and making decisions about Canadians under a statute that predates the smartphone. The gap between what the law requires and what AI practice demands is widening every year. Refreshed privacy law, modernized privacy law would also support AI development. Updated rules on data collection, use, and disclosure in the context of AI would enable the creation of trusted Canadian data sets for training AI systems and foster the private investment in AI development. Privacy is a critical value in Canadian society that we must protect and defend. While modernized privacy law alone will not address all AI risks, it is one important and overdue step. And it is notable that provincial and territorial privacy commissioners are starting to weigh in on the use of personal information in the context of AI, risking a fragmented approach and narrative on AI. Second is to build a Canadian AI assurance market. You've heard many times in this committee, including from the speaker just before me, that Canada is known for responsible AI and has made significant investments in AI ethics, good governance policy, and research over the past decade. We have an advantage in creating an AI assurance market like no other. Not only is an assurance market good business for Canada, it's also essential for supporting safe and beneficial AI development and deployment in Canada. To that end, Canada should build a functioning AI assurance market with accredited auditors, testing labs, and certification bodies that assess AI systems before and after deployment in high-impact contexts. And those building blocks already exist. Some are homegrown through some of our regulators, including Health Canada or OSFI, that have been piloting or embedding different AI assurance mechanisms into their sector guidance. And there's international guidance through the ISO 42000 series for AI management. Canada played an important role in the development of those standards. Moreover, federal procurement and funding mechanisms should require assurance evidence for high-impact AI use cases. Insurers should recognize certified AI governance in their underwriting, and standard-setting bodies should develop an accredited AI assurance profession. For Canada, this is also a commercial opportunity, positioning Canadian firms as the credible, trusted alternative in global AI procurement. It is also essential for the advancement of responsible AI because governance without verification is aspiration. We can write rules, but unless there's an independent mechanism to test whether AI meets those rules in practice, in real-world deployments, not just lab benchmarks, the rules are largely symbolic. And now third, make AI safety Canada's signature contribution. Canada has a distinctive opportunity in AI safety. We have world-class AI talent and a long track record of responsible multilateral engagement. AI safety should be Canada's brand. The Canadian AI Safety Institute is a start, but it must operate at full force and must be backed by the kind of sustained policy investment that signals to the world that Canada takes this seriously. Through the core regulatory ask here is simple. Companies must demonstrate transparency in their risk management processes and show that the systems they're building will minimize harm. Canada also has an opportunity to work multilaterally to secure treaties, international treaties, and support among some of our like-minded countries. In closing, 3 steps: modernize our privacy laws as a foundation for data sovereignty, build AI assurance market that turns accountability into a competitive advantage, and establish AI safety as a sustained Canadian brand and priority at home and through coalitions around the world. Thank you, and I welcome the committee's questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Singh-Dillon, the floor is yours, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and the Honourable Committee. Thank you for the opportunity for me to be here today. Canada has built a strong reputation in artificial intelligence. We are known globally for our research and our talent and the foundations we've helped create in this field. But the question is in front of us now, and it's not whether Canada understands AI, it's whether we are turning that understanding into real outcomes. Because the reality is Canada doesn't have an AI research problem, rather we have an AI translation problem. We're very good at developing models and advancing ideas at a research level. We're much less effective at deploying these systems in the environments where they actually create value, for example, like factories, supply chains, infrastructure, and core industries that drive our economy. The gap becomes even more important as AI evolves, and it is evolving on a daily basis. We've seen a version of this before. In other sectors, early signals were dismissed as premature until they became dominant industrial realities. Physical AI is following a similar trajectory, and the window to build capability may be shorter than it appears. We're now entering a phase where AI is no longer just digital, it's becoming physical, embedded into machines, robots, industrial systems that operate the real world. It is being embedded into machines. This includes what we describe as human-centered robotics, and in some cases, humanoid systems, technologies designed to work alongside people, not just behind a screen. The shift has direct implications for Canada's strategic industries, manufacturing, mining, transportation, construction, because this is where productivity, resilience, and long-term competitiveness is typically shaped. But Canada is not yet structured to lead in this next phase. We have the building blocks. We are missing is the capabilities and the abilities to bring them together in a coordinated fashion, to test these systems, validate them, integrate them, and deploy them at scale. This is a gap we are focused at the Centre for Designing Change. One example of this is a national initiative around human-centered robotics, humanoids. This is not just chasing a headline or building a single product. It is about using platforms to map Canadian supply chains, validate domestic capabilities, test systems in real environments, including extreme conditions, and ensure Canadian companies are part of what comes next. This work builds on CDC's broader national efforts in physical AI, including recent work with NGen Canada, examining Canadian industrial readiness and capability gaps in this space. Because if we don't build capability at that level, we risk relying on systems developed and controlled elsewhere in the very sectors we depend on. This connects to a broader issue that has come up in this study, data sovereignty. Data matters because it's the context of AI. Sovereignty goes beyond where data sits. It extends to who controls the systems, the infrastructure, and ultimately the deployment layer. Without that, we may participate in the AI economy, but we won't shape it and how it operates. As AI moves into physical environments, the challenge changes. It's no longer just about intelligence, it becomes about interaction. These systems are working alongside people. They need to interpret human behavior, respond appropriately, and know when to escalate or to step back safely. If they can't do that reliably, adoption will slow, not because of technology that doesn't work, but because people won't trust it. This is what I mean when we talk about emotionally intelligent AI. Not as an abstract idea, but as a practical requirement for safe and effective human-machine collaboration. So as we think about policy and regulations, the focus needs to expand. It's not just about developing AI or even regulating it. It's about enabling deployment responsibly, at scale, and in the sectors that matter most. And if I can leave you with one thought, it is Canada does not lack ambition in AI. We lack infrastructure to execute it. And if we can close that gap, particularly in physical AI and strategic industries, we have a real opportunity not to just participate in this shift, but to actually lead it. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, witnesses, for your opening testimony. We're now going to enter into the first round of questions. Mr. Guglielmin, the floor is yours for 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witness today for all of your expert testimony. Mr. Dillon, we've heard a lot at this committee about artificial intelligence and its use case to increase productivity, help us with the productivity issues, improve efficiencies, and really we've heard two different sides of this argument with respects to jobs. On the one hand, AI as a tool could be used to create jobs, and we just need to reskill people. On the other side of the equation is like more of a quasi-doomsday scenario where AI could lead to mass unemployment. From your perspective, where do you think the truth is, and what do you think the impact of artificial intelligence on jobs will be?
Thank you very much. Thank you for that question. I describe in my book, Soulful AI, that AI should not be deemed to be a technology, rather it's a digital species. It's like no other development that's been created by humanity. You can't compare it to steam, electricity, and computer power. The objective of AI is intelligence and the growth of its intelligence. And so companies are currently working towards AGI, which is general intelligence, which means it's as good, if not better, than humans, with superintelligence being maybe a decade or so behind that. So what will this do to the industrial revolution we all live in today? Because the reality is we live in a period that is governed by the structure of industrial revolutions. We're currently in 4.0. The largest line item on anyone's balance sheet, any corporation, any company, is human labor. The trends over the last 40 years of sending products and services overseas was simply to offset the balance sheet for human labor and the cost of the hourly. And so let's not kid ourselves that corporations and companies will not look to reduce the headcount of their companies if they can, both digital or physical, because they will. These are the trends. I think just this past Monday, Meta announced 16,000 layoffs in their organization. And so we are in a period where the growing use of AI, currently, I think, attacking white-collar jobs is occurring. But inevitably, this will look at both blue-collar and white-collar jobs, and inevitably, there will be a headcount reduction.
Thank you for that. So you also described in your opening statement humanoid robotics is a strategic opportunity for Canada. I was wondering if you could briefly define what you mean by that. And then who would you say is winning that race today, and where does Canada currently rank?
I'll start from the back end of the question. Who's winning the race today outrightly is China. China has a registered 50 to 150 humanoid robotics companies. The advancements in humanoids in the past 5 years is all down to artificial intelligence. It's all down to edge compute with neural networks doing end-to-end communication. China's leading because if we are not aware, China's going to have a birth rate drop-off, which is going to make Japan's look like it was not an issue. And China's going to backfill that drop-off in birth rate with automation, period. But I think we all understand how things work economically, and there is a global race. US is behind at 20 to 25 companies. Canada currently has 2 companies registered that are building humanoids. Our objective with our project is to, similar to when I built and worked on Canada's first electric vehicle, is to build a foundation that we can compete on a sovereign level globally, where we're not, as Canadians, having to buy Chinese products or US products, rather we're buying Canadian products to service our own industries.
So you've also mentioned that here we have world-class talent. We have world-class critical minerals. We, in some respects, especially with respect to education and information, we have a head start on artificial intelligence and advanced manufacturing. So you've argued that our constraints aren't the capability, it's execution and capital. So in my view, the government's role is to provide the environment for that to flourish. What do you think our number one risk is if we get that wrong, where we don't create the environment to have these sort of capabilities flourish and we become importers of technologies from countries like China or the United States?
I think in context of artificial intelligence, be it digital or physical, it is a moving target, and B, it's moving at a pace where if you aren't on top of your large language models over a 2-3 month period, you're falling behind. I think there has been some real positive news over the past few months of capital coming back to Canada, which is direly needed, because I work with multiple startups. I have my own, and every startup needs 2 things. They need customers and they need capital. If we don't get this right, let me just put into context physical AI in the context of humanoids. Morgan Stanley's report from last April 2025 suggests humanoids will be, by 2050, a $5 trillion revenue industry. So in context, that's double the size of the global automotive industry. I've grown up in the auto industry. I've spent 25 years there. Let's not kid ourselves. The IP and the revenues go outside of our country. We don't own a Canadian car company, and nor would I recommend we do in 2026. But we have a golden opportunity to lead in physical AI because, as you mentioned, we have all the pieces here. And so I think we're in this imperative period over the next few years to come out and to lead. And if we do this, I think we could truly be a global leader.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Guglielmi. Monsieur Latuba, la parole à vous, monsieur, pour la prochaine.
You have 6 minutes, Mr. Latuba. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Carroll, in your introduction, you said Canada was a leader in terms of IA research. You also said that there has to be a safeguarding of AI, establishing limits, which would be Canada's contribution. Given the evolution of humanity, how and given what is happening today, given the fact that there are jobs at risk, there are people who are losing their jobs. But if we think only of the automotive industry, the automobile has evolved, and now we have EVs. Given this evolution, how do you see the evolution of AI? It will have an impact. Therefore, what should our government do to provide a solution?
Thank you for that question. Absolutely, AI is going to have an impact on the job market. Part of this, and you've heard this before, it's about redirecting where some of the jobs will be had and investing in and upskilling much of our labor. We deal a lot. Look, I'm in the legal profession where we are acutely aware of the impact of artificial intelligence in the delivery or support of legal services. And we are actively thinking about ways that our lawyers across Canada are being de-skilled. And so how do we upskill? Part of the reason I suggest an Canadian AI assurance market is because AI is an incredibly important economic force. We have seen this through the inputs received by the government in response to the AI sprints. We need to think dynamically about where jobs will be created and skills will be needed and redirect in those areas. And I would posit that an AI assurance market is one area where there are specific investments that can be made that leverage our existing strengths, that speak to the Made in Canada AI, responsible AI brand, and that advance safety mechanisms that can allow us to use this technology in a safe manner that is tested and verified.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dillon, in your introduction, you spoke about a lack of infrastructure in Canada. Can you tell us what should be done, what must be done to provide that infrastructure? How do we build it? Research is being done, but it will not suffice on its own. How can we get ahead in terms of the infrastructure?
Thank you for that question. How can we get ahead with regards to the infrastructure? I think we need possibly two national policies that support AI and also the implementation of physical AI. I think these have to identify key sectors, and then I think that becomes the foundation to really accelerate the adoption of artificial intelligence. I've spent several years working with Industrial Revolution 4.0 digital manufacturing implementations, and I can tell you it is an absolute struggle having companies adapt sensory technologies, IoT devices to collect data in manufacturing here in Canada, specifically the auto industry. And I think it could be an uphill challenge if there isn't a national policy on AI and physical AI.
When we hear talk about data sovereignty, what does that mean for you? And perhaps you could explain that to those of us who are less understanding of what it means.
So data sovereignty means a lot of people think data is magical, and any unit that is collecting data somehow is giving positive data. It doesn't work that way. Data is deemed to be dirty or clean. You have to sift through to get the quality out of the data. The back end of AI is not the software on your phone or on your laptop. It's actually the data centers. The data used and the compute used needs to be the back end of what AI is modeled on. So in order for you to model your AI, you need to collect data. One of the reasons a lot of these large language models today have issues like biases is because they've scraped the internet to collect the data. And let's be honest, the internet isn't exactly, the most prestige and pristine element. It's a bit of a cesspool at times. And so data sovereignty means Canada is generating terabytes of data in every sector, in municipalities, provincially and federally. And we need to find a strategy and build a system where we're owning our own data. And by having that good, high-quality data, it potentially gives us an edge over our competitors.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Natuba.
Thank you, Mr. Natuba. Mr. Saint-Marie, 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair, and greetings to my colleagues and to our 3 witnesses. Thanks for being with us today. It's very interesting. My first question is the representative of Oracle. A few weeks ago, we heard Mr. Ishua Benzo, who spoke about a regulatory framework that is solid or would be necessary for AI, even greater than financial agreements if we follow the model of the European Union. Would you agree with his words or not, sir?
I'm sorry, I didn't fully get the question. If you don't mind repeating one more time.
Okay, I'll say it again. A few weeks ago, Mr. Benjouri came to speak to us here. What he said was a solid regulatory framework will not slow down the development of AI. He spoke about the European model that also deals with the financial aspect. Do you agree with what he said?
Yes, I want to say that regulatory framework, I think, is necessary to actually help accelerate AI development, versus being slow, because today, and I think my fellow panelists kind of touched upon this, is AI cannot be its own thing. It has to be part of a larger governance framework. And in fact, the safety aspect of AI and delivering the right kinds of applications of AI for the right end user and really human benefits is what we are all working together to get the right balance. So we continuously balance new opportunities to improve the lives of whether it's citizens, government organizations, private sector entities, with safety. And we truly look at regulatory bodies, whether they're governmental or even non-governmental organizations, to help build that framework in place, because that is going, in addition to the comments that were made around, for example, data and the necessity to have the right high quality data powering the large language models to get to the right answers and do it securely and safely. I'd say that's the larger problem statement that I think the whole industry and the world right now is experiencing. Regulations and regulatory frameworks are, and from my perspective, is an enabler. It's not a hindrance.
Okay. Merci.
Thank you. Well, does your business do any type of contracting with the Department of National Defense?
We have contracts in place with, from an Oracle perspective, we're obviously a multinational organization. We have contracts in place with, Canadian federal government, provincial, and territorial government from, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I think for many, many years. We've been in existence for, 40 plus years. For a large majority of that, we've always considered Canada to be one of our first markets that we invested in right outside of the U.S.
Okay, merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Clearly, the headquarters. I mean, your business is a large multinational. There's been a fortune made by the owner, perhaps the largest in the world, according to American media. But what concerns me is this, and perhaps my colleagues as well. Major industries, major businesses like yours have to protect personal information. We have learned open AI via chat GBT in interacting with the provinces. They have concluded that the protection of personal information would require an enlightened consent from the user. So, to your mind, should we adapt our laws to better protect personal information? And how would we be able then to frame any type of legislation dealing with that protection of personal information?
Yes, from an Oracle, I'll just comment from our experiences. Again, in my role today, I work with many governmental organizations in the U.S. and Canada, and I've worked with our commercial industries as well. So I'll say, just broadly speaking, it is always a good idea to put as much protection of personally identifiable information, especially PII information about citizens, about individuals, and continuously, see what additional protections and safety and guardrailing can we do to enable more, data protection fundamentally. And even forgetting the large language model for a second, this has been a belief system that we've had for decades, that data is the most important asset in this kind of an architecture, that, from a protection and from a privacy standpoint, we want to enable technically, and this is sort of my domain. Is I'm a technical practitioner of this, so I'll speak to from a technical standpoint. We're continuously looking at additional technologies and capabilities, whether it's encrypting the data, whether it's controlling the access of who has access to what, where, and how, whether it's auditability, so you have complete lineage and traceability of what has happened in every system that stores these records. And that is sort of a consistent pattern and a consistent architecture that we've recommended for our customers, Oracle customers everywhere. Now, with coming to the advent of large language models, and now with generative AI, we don't necessarily believe that that should get a special pass to go straight into your data and do whatever it wants to be able to do. We believe it should go through those, at the very least, go through those same set of defensive layers that we've built on the data pre-AI. So you are safeguarded just like a human being when they try to access data that may or may not have authorization for. The AI model needs to go through those same layers, but now we're building much more robust protection specifically for AI on top of that. So to answer your question, I don't believe...
Sir, I'm afraid I'm going to have to end there. We went quite a bit over, but there'll be an opportunity for you to return to that conclusionary remark there. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Saint-Marie. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses today. We certainly appreciate your testimony for this important study. My question for Mr. Dillon. After yesterday's announcement from the Privacy Commissioner regarding an investigation into OpenAI privacy concerns, do you believe strong enough action was taken, and do you believe we will see more cases similar to this if we deploy AI before proper legislation is in place?
So, in context, about a decade ago, I was here in Ottawa pushing for Transport Canada to ease off on policies around autonomous vehicles, which in theory are machine learning and AI. But since the advent of large language models and the essence of my book, it's all about bring on the regulations, bring on the policies. I refer back to the description I use of what we currently have today as being a digital species. I've even heard the US is now considering to bring in regulations. And so I feel at this present moment, when it comes to privacy and safety around AI in general, including large language models, and should be very tight. But it has to be done on a global level because, again, economically, we're in a race. And so if some of our competitors are not willing to do so, it's a conversation internally or with our partners on where do we stand.
And sir, do you believe that being that our AI is so heavily integrated within foreign firms, can that pose a greater risk for us?
Well, the reality is the data, when we use OpenAI's ChatGPT, the data is actually going back to their data centers. It's not staying here with us, so there is a sovereignty issue, absolutely. Considering we have the godfather of AI in Ontario and also in Quebec, because I believe there's two, and considering we've got some of the brightest minds in AI research, I think there is a golden opportunity for Canada to support its competitors to these other large language models where we have more oversight on the data that is then used and generated.
One of the concerns we're hearing throughout this study is that AI systems are increasingly influencing decisions in hiring, lending, healthcare, policing, and even public services, often without Canadians fully understanding how these systems operate or how decisions are being made. At the same time, many of these systems are developed by large foreign technology companies with limited public transparency, and then Canadian data collected usually falls under Ford's legislation. So how do we ensure Canadians retain oversight over AI decisions and the ownership of our own data?
I think the simple answer to that is not necessarily using other so-called competitor products that don't necessarily belong to Canada. But I don't think that's the easiest response and answer because it is moving so quickly. Most companies and organizations are already developing and using large language models, which is now the prominent, description of AI. I think it goes back to my second response, which is for Canadian companies, some of them who are listed as being a part of this standing committee need to be supported in order for us to compete. At the moment, it looks like there's a two-horse race between the US and China on companies developing large language models. The frustrating thing for myself is we are the global center of AI research. How do we not have a dog in this race? And so I think with the changes and the deglobalization, I think there is a golden opportunity for Canada to break its barriers of restriction and truly compete globally. But it's going to need support.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Borelli. Madame O'Rourke, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. I'd like to go to Ms. Piovesan first. My concern is that we're waiting for this AI framework, and we think that one framework or one law is going to do it all, but we're hearing about ChatGPT, then we're going to get to agentic, then we're going to get to superintelligence. We're hearing, some witnesses said you should have an AI conversation in every single standing committee, which I tend to agree with. So just really quick question, is this one law? Is it several? Is there any way the framework is going to be comprehensive enough? Because my concern is, regardless of what we table, people will say it's too much or it's not enough, and then we won't move forward. So what are your thoughts on the best approach at this time?
Thank you for that question. I tend to agree with you that it's not going to be just one framework, but an overarching governance framework or a strategy, an approach to what it means for Canada to properly govern high impact AI systems within our jurisdiction is important. I remind the committee that we already have laws in place that are governing certain aspects of artificial intelligence. And depending on the sector, we might actually have more guidance available to those operating. For example, OSFI and its guidance that has come out that updated the model risk management approach for financial services recently in partnership with the Global Risk Institute, plus a series of financial operators coming out with the agile framework and the EDGE principles, again, for financial services to have a governance framework for the use of AI in various contexts in financial services. We can leverage what sectors are doing to inform what the center ought to do and fill gaps. And I think that is an important approach that I raised in the Ethics Committee last year, that in looking at different jurisdictions and how they have been modeling and attempting to put together an overarching framework, that framework doesn't have to be perfect. It has to create a narrative around what AI governance looks like, what we're drawing from in terms of sectoral and provincial territorial existing laws, and then fill gaps to provide that clarity.
Okay, great. Thank you. I participated in an Interparliamentary Union webinar on AI. They are saying, much to Mr. Jahangir's point, data is the most important asset. I'm hearing data is the new oil. But we also heard from witnesses that it may not be possible to have this comprehensive auditability. That's what Mr. Jahangir referred to. And then Ms. Piovesan, you said we need an AI assurance market. So we're hearing once the AI could be verified at the moment it's launched, but with agentic or superintelligence, you don't know what it's going to do next. Do we have that capacity now? What safeguards do we put in place, and how does that evolve over time?
So when the AI assurance market is meant to address that exact point, that we put in place the required professional skills, the technology that's needed, the process and policy, the law and framework to get us ready for agentic and superintelligence. So that's exactly what the AI assurance market is meant to do. It's also really core to who we are. So going back to 2017, and Canada was the first to come out with an AI strategy, threw money behind it. I very much echo Mr. Dillon's point about how we are the leaders in AI research. We are also the leaders in many ways in AI ethics, AI governance, AI law and policy, not law on the books, but the thinking behind it. And we should leverage these different values and skills that we have to bring to Canada and get us ready for emerging technology as it changes, which is happening very rapidly.
Great. Mr. Jahangir, do you have something to say about the comprehensive auditability? Does it exist now? Because we don't want to be researching and getting everything so perfect that we miss the boat on the commercialization and the adoption, right?
Yes.
Just a quick note, it'll be about 30 seconds in the reply here. Thank you.
Okay. Again, we are working specific initiatives and projects focusing on auditability, traceability, those requirements. So I think a lot of the ability to do that kind of audit, that governance, really starts with what is the end user doing? Kind of what is the usage pattern of the AI, and making sure we're catching every interaction point and every transaction downstream from that initial user's prompt to a model. We are building traceability, auditability as a fundamental requirement. It's not a afterthought. So from a practical perspective today, we are seeing this. Again, it's evolving on how we're doing it, but it is certainly a foundation upon which we are creating certain levels of predictability and guardrails for end users who are using this.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Madame O'Rourke. Monsieur Saint-Marie, 2 minutes 30 seconds.
Mr. Saint-Marie, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Yes, a question for Ms. Piovesan. In your presentation and in the exchange you just had with Ms. O'Rourke, you talked about a general assurance AI assurance market, but that is something that is provincial jurisdiction rather than federal jurisdiction. What would you advise, and how could that be brought about?
For coordination among Canada, we cannot have a fragmented assurance market in our country. We're moving towards greater mobilization and harmonization across Canada. Every jurisdiction has an important contribution to make. In fact, I would say we could leverage some of the lessons from Quebec's Law 25 to be able to bake into this, part of this assurance market. We really have to guard against over-fragmentation. It will be extremely challenging, and it will create an uncompetitive ecosystem in Canada.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. TELUS told us that to protect data, there are three things that are important. One, legislation with respect to PIPEDA. Two, no country should apply to our domain in a specific case where there is a sharing of data through business undertakings. And three, the proper operation of the system, the kill switch issue. So according to you, Ms. Pio-Visant, do you think that the sharing of information with other undertakings should meet these three conditions?
If I understand the conditions properly, I think, look, the sharing of information, we have a precedent. Again, turning to Law 25 from Quebec, we have a precedent where you can undertake, and in the Quebec context, you are required to undertake an assessment of data sharing, a privacy impact assessment where data is personal information of Quebec citizens or residents are going to move outside of the Quebec borders. That's a precedent that we have. And we see this in the EU under the General Data Protection Regulation, where if there are particular data transfers, there is a requirement for an assessment. I think already in our existing law, we have a requirement to establish contractual assurances for any data flow, and we've seen this. So I think there are precedents for enabling and requiring, in fact, an assessment and consideration of how data flows outside of either a particular jurisdiction, certainly out of Canada.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Saint-Marie.
Thank you, Mr. Saint-Marie.
You for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So, Mr. Dillon, I want to return to the discussion we were having about risk a few moments ago. And we're talking in the context of us sort of missing the boat with respect to the auto sector to have the opportunity to own our own companies, and how you definitely do not suggest that being repeated in the AI industry, especially with respect to physical AI. Now, what would you say the specific risks are to Canada if a country like China or the United States sort of sets the rules of the game when it comes to the use cases of these technologies? Because we know both these countries are making this a strategic industry.
Thank you for the question. Look, I think the best way to describe this AI revolution is if we break it up from digital to physical, 80% of it is going to become physical and 20% may stay digital. And if that's the numbers, then physical means sectors, everything from mining to, say, aerospace or space. And so the advancements of AI, both negative and positive, are going to mean revolutions in medicine, in manufacturing. China's already launched several what they call lights-out manufacturing facilities. And that basically means there's no heating or no lighting because there are no humans working in those facilities. And I believe Quebec has actually launched its first, the first of its kind in Canada. I've been here 33 years from the UK. I've been frustrated for about 33 years about the pace of change here in Canada. If I go back to the Avro Aero, I think it's got a lot to do with the culture that changed in Canada. But I think we've got a golden opportunity because We are the center of AI research in design and, as my colleague has said, in policy as well. We have a golden opportunity to push forward. And if we do, we could win. We could truly win, because the back end of all of these is also critical minerals, which we have an abundance of.
So, Scale AI's Julian Billet said publicly, I'm quoting him here, that the industry is waiting for a signal from government. And would you say in the absence of that signal, the industry continues to, I don't want to say sit on its hands, but with a lack of clarity, does it put negative pressure on sort of the innovative side of this, or like the commercialization side?
You know, I think it's one of the challenges here is that we sometimes wait for government to support initiatives, but then you do get the RIMs and the /Blackberries who didn't necessarily need government support to scale. You get the Shopifys who didn't need government support necessarily directly to scale. I think we're at that moment. I think with the announcements of a sovereign fund, I think with the announcements and the relationships growing in Europe with Canada, and when the reduction of trade south of the border but going global, I think positions Canada truly to lead at this present moment. But I think, rest assured, this is the new game in town, and it's not going away. AI will be an element of every sector. There will be nothing from education K to 12 to space. There is going to be no sector, no element that will be free from implementation of AI. So we must lead on it.
So I want to bring it back to workers for a quick moment. Now, if the United States or China, for that matter, captures the humanoid robotic industry through acquisition, scaling, or through standard setting, what would you say that would mean concretely for auto workers, say, in like Windsor or Oshawa? Like, is there a risk that we start losing productivity and production capacity?
As I mentioned earlier, the OEMs in Canada are not Canadian. And so for the Detroit 3 to have facilities in Canada and for them to be able to reduce the headcount, they'll 100% do it. You know, Toyota's already mentioned a relationship with Agility Robots, an American company. And so the reduction of headcount is inevitable. This isn't, it could happen. It absolutely will happen. But what we need to do, I think, probably federally, is look at Society 6.0. We're currently in what they deem to be calling Society 5.0. What happens? Well, what happened before the Industrial Revolution, the cottage industries, and how things changed. And now we should be forecasting the next 25 years to make sure we get this right. There will be an absolute headcount reduction. There is no doubt about this. Everybody's talking about this. China's leading it. For Canada, it could mean the utopia, but as we go through the dystopia and the challenges over the next several years.
Thank you, Mr. Guglielmin. Okay, Mr. Ma, you'll be our last for this round. You've got 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all the witnesses being here today. My first question is for Mr. Jahangir. You mentioned the need for a skills development and certification pathway for AI. How do you envision the rollout of these certifications? And are you picturing something like the Oracle or Cisco certifications?
Well, I mean, certifications are, there's variety of domains that from a certification standpoint we think about. Obviously, there's certifications and trainings and skills development for people who are in the AI research field or development or engineering to kind of build next generation AI applications. So, and Oracle, just like many of our peer group in the industry, we all rely heavily on sort of digital training, in-person training, and then certification paths for those technical professions. What we are starting to also see sector by sector, I think, one of my fellow panelists mentioned, like we're seeing the spectrum all the way from, whether it's K through 12 or all the way, space work. But I'll just take a sector in the middle, healthcare, like radiologist. There's now emerging specific skills and specific kinds of profiles of knowledge and expertise that we are seeing, role specific, profession specific, like example radiology, who are going to be trained and certified in responsible usage of AI tools and models to help, again, not replace them, but accelerate their work, help them be better at analyzing image data, for example, with power of digital vision based analysis. So those are the ways we see, from a skills and a training perspective. I would just say that we're early in the game here. This is maturing. This is changing. We have to, continuously listen and learn from what actual real end users are experiencing and how they're using it to adapt all of our strategies to scale, to train, to enable the workforce. And we have to, I believe we have to do this over the next, many years to continuously help our employees or even just average human users of AI to continuously learn that, what is safe, what is responsible.
Thank you. My next question is for Ms. Pio Versan. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. You've discussed creating a Canadian AI insurance market earlier and centered around responsible AI, where we turn accountability into competitive advantage. Can you walk us through the use case for this insurance market, and also based on what we just discussed about an AI certification, does that play into the AI insurance market as well?
Taking your second question first, it certainly will play into the insurance market. We're looking for, and in fact, we actually have a market that's already in development with certain startups that are getting ahead and being supported in some cases by global insurance companies to provide AI-specific insurance. As well, we're finding that the large number of S&P 500 companies are starting to report their use of AI in their filings. So the idea is that we not only take our fantastic research and move it into commercialization. I agree with what the other panelists have said, that we have to move faster on adoption. We have to move faster on national literacy for AI so we know how to adopt appropriately. At the same time, it is really important that we lead this framework that we have been working on for years and move it into operationalization. Singapore is a very interesting market where there has been an effort to take their AI Verify framework and start to identify ways to turn some of those requirements for validation and verification of AI systems and auditing of those systems into professional certifications that are governed by a body and reported to that body. I think there's a very interesting opportunity for Canada there.
And following with that, your last point is about positioning Canada's brand in AI safety. If you were the marketing managers for this brand, what would you do to launch this strategy, and what are we selling and who are we selling it to?
Very quickly, please, as we're running over time. Thank you.
We're lucky we have an AI minister. We would take that minister and start telling the world about how we are investing in safety and responsible AI, building on over a decade of investment in those areas.
Thank you, Mr. Ma. Okay, thank you, colleagues. Witnesses, we very much appreciate you providing some guidance and insight here today. We're going to suspend briefly for a few minutes. Ted. Okay, we are going to start our second hour here. Welcome to our new witnesses who are joining, one online, three here in the room. Colleagues, just letting you know we're going to have the first two rounds of questions, but not the third, as we're running a little bit over time. But we're in good shape to get the ball rolling here. We have from the Council of Canadian Innovators, Laurent Carbonneau, the Vice President, Policy and Advocacy, and Daniel Perry, Director, Federal Affairs. Welcome very much. Thank you very much for being here, and welcome. Daniel, we saw each other 48 hours ago, so nice to have you here. Yeah, indeed. From Hypertech Group, we have Simon Adut, who is the Chief Executive Officer. Welcome. And from Photonic Inc., we have Stephanie Simmons, the Chief Quantum Officer, who is joining us here today. Chief Quantum Officer is not a business card I would have seen when I was in school, and perhaps that speaks to where we are at this moment in time. So with that, Ms. Simmons, the floor will be yours for upwards of 5 minutes, and we'll look forward to hearing your testimony. Je peux confirmer qu'on a,
I can confirm that we have run all the audiovisual tests necessary, and we're ready to go.
yours for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to appear today. My name is Stephanie Simmons, and yes, I am the Chief Quantum Officer and founder of Photonic Inc. That will become a title you see throughout the industry, just like Chief AI has come through. These things are going to change the world. I'm an associate professor, also associate professor of physics at Simon Fraser University, and I'm a Canadian research chair and co-chair of Canada's National Quantum Strategies Advisory Council. So I've been in quantum since 2001, and I've a lot to share, and thank you very much for your interest. Photonic is proud to be a Canadian leader in quantum computing. We are founded and remain headquartered in beautiful British Columbia. Since beginning commercial operations in 2021, we have now raised more than $375 million and have over 160 employees in Canada and in various allied countries. At Photonic, our core mission is to frankly, commercialize the next branch of physics. It's to build the world's first commercial scale fault tolerant quantum computer, and as such to build a truly generational Canadian success story. I'm here today to explain how quantum technologies that we and our peers in the sector are developing will complement and accelerate the fantastic work going on in the AI sector, give us all a preview of where the puck is going so we can prepare, and outline why supporting and anchoring Canada's quantum companies and talent is not just vital for the quantum sector, but also for the AI sector, and to ensure that the two sectors can combine to be a key driver of Canada's economic prosperity and national security. So, what's quantum? So semiconductor physics has given rise to all of the computational gains and economic output we see today. Quantum technologies use the next set of physical laws that we can leverage for gain. So they involve harnessing quantum mechanics to create capabilities that are beyond the capabilities of conventional classical physics, like binary 0 and 1 physics. So this will enable a range of highly impactful dual-use technologies, and this includes computing, communications, sensing, and others, in turn unlocking use cases in sectors across the board. This is a platform capability that offers exponential speedups or otherwise unobtainable capabilities. Quantum technologies will not replace classical computing systems, which power much of our current digital infrastructure, including AI. However, it will work with them and enable them and make them better. And just like the introduction of the airplane did not replace cars or trucks or ships in our transportation system, they unlocked completely new capabilities, such as going to the moon, GPS, and everything else on top of that. It also resolved formerly difficult and resource-intensive issues. So similarly, you probably, I say probably, but you probably will not have a quantum laptop, but you might have your life saved by a drug that was designed with a combination of quantum and AI systems. And by themselves, quantum technologies offer exponential speedups in key algorithms and advantages in key algorithms, including some of the algorithms underpinning AI. The math of quantum is the math of AI, and they are expected to create a market worth hundreds of billions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of jobs in Canada in the next 10 years. So, excitingly and relevant to the topic here today, quantum computing will be enabler and accelerator of AI. For example, quantum computers will accelerate key parts of classical AI and machine learning that are currently bottlenecking and driving significant power consumption. Quantum is far, far more power efficient. Quantum computers will also be able to improve AI decision-making and solution diversity of AI capabilities, specifically in places where the data needs to be very high in accuracy. And this covers the material world writ large. Quantum can play a really key role in building out large chemistry models, large physical models beyond the large language models and capabilities of today. The synergies work in the other direction as well. So AI is across the entire quantum stack. So it's right down on the metal, driving the quantum bits that we use. And also it can make all the way up through the error correction and all the way to the algorithms, becoming more reliable and efficient by using AI capabilities. So given Canada's early investment and leadership in both of these sectors, it's critical that both quantum and AI continue to be supported in the government through responsible policies, programs, and funding, and its role as an early adopter and strategic anchor customer. So to be clear, quantum is at an earlier stage of its maturity cycle relative to AI, but imagine we could go back to 2018 and predict that the AI wave was to arrive within the next few years. This is exactly the position we are in with quantum. We have a few short years to prepare for the wave that is to come. Fully deployed utility-scale quantum computers are not currently available in the market, but the industry is making incredible progress, and the arrival is within the next few short years. This gives Canada a real opportunity to cement its position as a global leader and ensure that we don't repeat the very well-trodden path that we heard earlier this morning even, of technologies being invented, grandfathered, and developed in Canada, but commercialized mostly abroad. 2025 marked an inflection point in Canada's leadership.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but unfortunately, I've let it go a little bit over time, but I'm sure that members will return to you during the question round, and you'll have an opportunity there to share a little.
I was one sentence away, so.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, we'll get that sentence done in a little bit. Mr. Perry, I'll turn to you now. The floor is yours for upwards of 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, committee members. My name is Daniel Perry. I'm the Director of Federal Affairs at the Council of Canadian Innovators. I'm joined by my colleague, Laurent Carbonneau, our Vice President of Policy and Advocacy. The Council of Canadian Innovators is Canada's 21st century business council. We represent over 175 Canadian headquartered high-growth technology companies operating across a number of sectors, including artificial intelligence, digital infrastructure, advanced manufacturing, and defense. And as we take a look at the conversation today, I wanted to step back and take a look at the global economy. It is no longer neutral or rules-based. Leading economies are actively shaping markets and securing control over critical technologies, value chains, and standards. And they're doing this by leveraging economic policies and industrial strategies. We've seen this recently in the United States National Security Strategy, where America is treating technology leadership, control over critical technologies, and economic strength as a core instrument for geopolitical power. And AI sits at the center of this shift as a foundational layer of economic growth and national security. Global economies are becoming increasingly driven by the intangible assets. So this includes data, intellectual property, algorithms, and this is determining where value is created and captured. These assets alone make up roughly 92% of the S&P 500 and are approaching $100 trillion in global value. In an environment like this, firms that define and capture greater returns are those that are leading out of the gate, and same with the countries that are hosting these competitive firms. And this is important context for the committee's work. Canada has helped pioneer modern artificial intelligence, like we heard earlier in the panel today. But as outlined in our submission to the Minister's AI Task Force, we have not translated this leadership into scalable companies or sustainable economic advantages. And this pattern is familiar. We've seen it before. We generate the ideas here, but we fail to commercialize them. Early stage scaling firms leave this country and are defined in others. And with that, they take their IP, they take their data and decision-making power outside of Canada. And at a time when our peer countries are moving aggressively, the continued delay in releasing Canada's AI strategy is not neutral. It is actually putting Canadian firms further and further behind in a race where speed, scale, and early market positioning determines long-term winners. As we outlined in our task force submission, we had 3 points. First, enabling Canadian firms to scale here. The core barriers are well understood: access to capital, access to customers, and access to talent. Without addressing this, Canadian firms will continue to grow inside foreign systems, and we will lose control over long-term economic value. Our second recommendation focused on building sovereign AI infrastructure. So this is compute, cloud capabilities, data, which are all fundamental for an economic infrastructure of the 21st century. And without domestic capacity or control for that matter, both our companies and our public institutions are becoming dependent on foreign platforms and foreign legal systems. Our final recommendation focused on high-value application within Canada. So this is areas that Canada has our natural strength and an industrial base to perform under. And these priorities align what we're hearing from the government in their forthcoming AI strategy, as well as the details in the spring economic update. But the issue in Canada has never been identifying the priorities. It has been on execution. And one of the reasons we're struggling is we have key policy instruments that we're simply not using. Take public procurement, for instance. It's one of the most powerful tools that all governments have at their disposal, but we're not leveraging it properly. Domestically, procurement makes up 14% of our GDP. This will not only help firms here in Canada, but it will also be a validator for Canadian technology when the Canadian government or other governments purchase it, as well as help the firms scale here in Canada. Also, foreign direct investment. Canada's approach has largely been volume-driven versus outcome-driven. Our success has been measured by how much capital enters the country and not by what we retain in terms of those intangible assets. So again, IP, data, and the long-term value. In strategic sectors like AI, this creates a real risk to our economic sovereignty as well as our national security. If Canada does not reorient its approach, we risk becoming a branch plant economy, and we will be missing one of the most important technology transitions of our time. But the window is still open. There is time to action. What we need now is a coordinated strategy that aligns economic policy, industrial capability, and national security objectives around one common goal, and that is building and scaling Canadian firms that own and control their assets. And this will set up the economy of today, tomorrow, and for future generations. And with that, thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perry. Mr. Adu, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président et membres du comité. Je m'appelle Simon Adout, je suis le PDG.
Members of the committee, my name is Simon Adout, and we have been working in our business for quite a number of years. From this time, we have gone through all types of phases in the development of our industry. We have an understanding of what we do, but also in the calculation of AI. We are very well positioned to address what is happening with AI. But we are also able to maximize the sustainability of our systems.
So, in general, what we see is the key importance for artificial intelligence is first, overall, it's to fill a productivity gap. You know, what we're seeing, I mean, I was just walking down the road here in Ottawa, and there's a lot of maintenance that needs to be done, but it's expensive. There's a certain amount of resources we can put to it. If we could have that done more productively, more efficiently, and that would do well all around. And a lot of times when we see, we're importing a lot of things from abroad, if we could do them more efficiently here, that would be a way for us to make sure that we could deliver more competitive products and, frankly, not have to bring them in from inside, generate them internally. That productivity is also a question of we already have the capabilities overall for digitization and computer systems. What AI does, in large part, is to reduce the friction in interacting with them. For example, I have my wife who's an audiologist. She will help people who have hearing loss, but she spends a significant portion of her time entering the information into a system. So when you have a professional who's very caring, who's very capable in helping somebody who has a disability, they spend a lot of their time, instead of interacting with people, interacting with the software system, with the computer system. What AI can help to do in large part is to reduce that time and to let the computer do more of its own work afterwards, so you don't need constant human intervention in getting it done. And in order to develop those capabilities, what's going to be really important is to ensure that that infrastructure is available. So having those tools available to a population will enable us to make sure we can gain those productivity improvements that will help us be more competitive and, frankly, improve a lot of the quality of life. Now, when we talk about, that's AI as a whole, just accessibility of it. But when we talk about AI sovereignty, which I think is one of the big topics that are coming up there right now, the first dimension is that question of accessibility. So do our workers, do our citizens have access to those tools in the first place? Here in Canada, I think most people can access some basic tools, but still there are other considerations that make it a little bit more difficult. The next level is commercialization. So if we look at AI as an industry in the future, what proportion of that industry is being produced here as opposed to consumed here? Basically, are we a net consumer or net producer of artificial intelligence services? If we are a net consumer, then if we suppose it was a $100 billion industry and we consume 25% more than we produce, that would mean $25 billion that leaves the country every year. So this can get very material. And Canada has an opportunity to become a net producer so we can actually help supply the world. And there's additional advantages of that I can go into afterwards. The next level, which is very much, I think, one of the key topics that we must address, are when we talk about questions of confidentiality and protection, such as for data sovereignty. If we are completely dependent on the outside, there is a risk that they could withhold access to those systems. There's also concern around the data. So when we talk about access to the data, when you look at that question of data sovereignty, and artificial intelligence thrives on access to that data. So your data sovereignty is only as good as your AI sovereignty for whatever data that AI is accessing. So it'll be very important to consider maintaining the ability, developing the ability, and ensuring that we're always able to stay competitive with the access, but also at least be able to produce a portion of it locally so that we can help succeed in the future. Now, going back to that piece of commercialization, there's a value chain that goes into AI. And in Jensen's speeches lately, he's been talking about this notion of a 5-layer cake. So it starts with power, goes to data center, compute, then you get into the models, and then you get into the applications. The largest piece of that is going to be applications. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who buy all the other layers underneath. Right now, we haven't settled what those winning applications will be. There's an opportunity for Canada to take a position in becoming the main providers for those applications, or at least an important provider for those applications, and positioning ourselves as a net producer for the world. So being able to foster that is going to involve creating the infrastructure, creating the system so we can actually deliver that. When we look at the opportunity for Canada, currently the leaders in the commercialization are the USA and China. I don't see really that we'd be able to completely unseat them, but we can take a really important role. And I see we're first tier in AI research. We understand the importance of sustainable development, and we have an eye to safety, AI safety, and making sure that it's a net positive for the world. So what I see is we have an opportunity to demonstrate to the world how to effectively enable AI in the way that's safe and sustainable, and set that model so everybody can help do it the same way.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Falk, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our presenters today. Appreciate the testimony that you've provided for this committee. We've heard a lot about sovereign compute and Canadian-controlled infrastructure. In practical terms, what does AI sovereignty mean to you, Mr. Perry?
I would say that what it means to us is that we control our data, that it is stored here in Canada, it's transferred here in Canada, and we have the control over it. Something that is very concerning to not just ECI, but also our members as well, is the U.S. Cloud Act. So how the U.S. government can compel companies to provide data that's stored on their servers. So even if it's a Canadian company, my health data might be stored on a U.S. server, the U.S. government can demand that that be provided. So that's obviously not just foregoing my privacy, but also sovereignty as well when we get into more technical issues when it comes to national security and other parts of how the government's working. So for us, it would be leveraging and finding opportunities to build sovereignty here in Canada and building a stack that is mostly Canadian, because we don't have the technology right now to be able to build out a full stack. But we want to make sure that we do the best we can to ensure we're protecting Canadians, protecting their data, protecting their privacy. And that starts with sovereignty. So we need to own it. We need to be able to control it. And if we want to be able to protect ourselves.
Thank you. We've heard from a lot of witnesses during this study that we actually do a lot of developing here in Canada. We spawn a lot of ideas here. But when it comes to commercialization and expansion of those ideas, it usually lands up on foreign soil somewhere. When you consider the resources that we have here, whether it's the IP, the people, what do you think our strategic or competitive advantage as a country is?
As a country, we are a very well-educated country, and we have seen that. That's why we are some of the greatest founders when it comes to artificial intelligence. The challenge is, how do we commercialize it? So our IP practices in Canada, they need to be strengthened. We need better ways for people to come up with these great ideas and then transition them into companies and be able to grow them here. So one of that steps is access to capital. So making sure we have capital systems in our country that can support these businesses, whether that's the banks, whether that's private investors, or even the government to a certain extent. The next part is finding customers. One of the biggest challenges that our members do find is selling to our Canadian government. And that is one of the biggest opportunities. Like I mentioned, procurement in Canada across federal, provincial, municipal makes up about 14% of our GDP. If we can even raise that slightly more towards Canadian innovators, Canadian companies, that will have a large success. Another challenge, too, is when our companies go to sell abroad, the first question they get asked, are you selling to the Canadian government? And then the follow-up question is, why not? And the challenge is, it's a very complicated process. It favors the incumbents and favors bigger companies because the hoops you have to jump through in order to be able to sell to the government. To be quite frank with you, a lot of scaling firms don't have the capacity, they don't have the time. So when we're making buying Canadian policies, we really need to understand who we're targeting these towards, making sure that the requirements that are in it meet the needs of the companies, and understanding what talent we do have here in Canada and making sure we're putting them forward and ensuring that they have access to the procurement process.
In your comments, you made a reference to a plant branch economy here. Do you want to expand on that idea a little bit? What do you mean by that?
The branch plant economy is when we have an economy here, but the assets don't stay here. So the IP is stored elsewhere, America, China, Asia. So we do all the work, we come up with the ideas, but it leaves the country. It goes back to the home country where the headquarters of the company is. So that's why it's very important when we're making decisions about what is a Canadian company, how do we support them. We need to understand where the management team is. Are they here in Canada or are they elsewhere? Is the IP stored here? Where are the profits going? If they're flowing back to another country, that's not really providing Canadians value. At the end of the day, like I mentioned, the S&P 500, a bulk of it is made up of the intangible assets, so IP, data, brands as well. So we really need to have a better understanding of what those assets are and how to better leverage it.
Okay, thank you. We've also heard testimony here that the industry, the folks working in AI, are desperately wanting regulations, and they want to know where the guardrails are. Can you maybe, in the minute that we have left to talk about it, present some ideas to this committee of where the guardrails should be and what are the boundaries that we need to establish when developing AI policy?
When it comes to the guardrails and the balance, I think we need to introduce something. At the end of the day, in order to kind of move forward, we need to have an agreement as a country of where we're going. How we got here today, we have agreements on speed limits. We have agreements on which way you travel on a road. I think there needs to be some basic guardrails in place because at the end of the day, AI is changing rapidly. At the beginning of the year, AI looked very different to where it is now. So we need to kind of just get the framework in place to kind of help these companies move forward so we can regulate them to a point where they can continue to grow, but we don't want to over-regulate them as well. So by having a foundation in place, that is a good step forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Falk. Mr. Bardizzi, the floor is yours for 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Thanks to all the panelists. I have a few questions about company and company formation and capital accumulation, and a couple of questions around the relationship between AI adoption and worker displacement. So we've heard both the previous panel on the prospect of a assurance and insurance economy around AI, and now in this panel more about the opportunities around data sovereignty, and its relationship to AI sovereignty. What are the specific opportunities you are seeing, and maybe I'll start with the CCI folks, around company formation that takes advantage of some of the specific and unique data pools that might exist in Canada or elsewhere?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that we actually talked about in our report to the minister in the scope of his task force, that, Daniel walked us through kind of the pillars of what we had recommended, which is to say, look overall at the picture of barriers to scale, because if Canada isn't a place where you can scale a business, it's not going to be a place where you can scale an AI business. The second piece, sovereignty, of course. I think we need to be sure that we control our own light switches and plumbing to kind of the maximum extent that we can that still makes sense commercially. But third, and this kind of goes to Mr. Fox's question as well, is how many, what are the assets that we have that are unique? And Canada actually has, for instance, and actually to pick up on Simon's comments earlier about, the 5-layer cake, the application layer also is incredibly reliant on really, really high quality domain-specific data. And we have really good data in Canada. And those pools of data typically are not well governed. They are very split. There's a lot of public sector data that isn't well leveraged that we could be leveraging a lot better. So in the scope of the AI strategy that I understand is forthcoming, I think one thing that needs to be very highly prioritized is how do we make public sector data that is domain specific and high quality. And I think here like geospatial data, agriculture data, mobility data, how do we make that available to Canadian innovators in a way that helps them scale their businesses and creates a unique selling point for Canada?
And what about what private sector data sources are most germane to this? Obviously, we have some concentrations in the economy, which creates some issues, but also creates pools of data that are maybe larger than in some other sectors.
Yeah, great question, and I don't want to get too into the weeds here on what might be or might not be appropriate. And of course, companies that own their data are free to make decisions about how they make that available, subject to privacy laws, et cetera. But certainly we have a very rich, data-rich financial sector, other sectors of the economy that are more regulated than others that might have access to lots of really rich data. Certainly, I think about, we kind of caught the tail end of the last panel on industrial AI and physical AI. I think really interesting work going on in the robotic space in Canada. I think we're kind of underrating ourselves as a player in that space, and I think there's some really good potential there. How that can be leveraged more broadly, I think open question, I think would be an interesting avenue to kind of pursue more fulsome discussion of. But I definitely start by looking at these places like telecom and financial sector that have very, very data-rich assets, but are quite regulated. And at this point, I don't think we quite know what to do with them.
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe I'll move on to Monsieur Adut and Ms. Simmons with a couple of questions around, from your perspective as company leaders or founders, in your spaces, when you see the AI technologies available in your particular spaces, how do you think about the adoption of those technologies and its relationship to your present or future workforce, including workers that you might not need to hire because of the adoption of these technologies?
So I think that when I look at the adoption of AI technologies, what I really look at is the additional headroom that it gives me for the capacity I have and my ability to be more competitive in delivering services. Because in the IT space, things move really, really quickly in the technology space. I mean, AI as a technology that's really mainstream is maybe 3 or 4 years old. So that's really quick for such a huge impact. The ability to navigate that quickly is critical. So what I'm seeing is directly within my organization, it's to be able to streamline a lot of processes, accelerate the change, make it so that we can adapt to it much more quickly, scale up more quickly, so that we can respond to those demands as they come without needing to walk into that very extensive time it takes to build up the capacity. So we can accelerate the buildup of capacity and deliver better service without needing to, we wouldn't want to scale down, we wouldn't want to incur the time to scale up too much. And that's the main thing. The other thing that I would hope is all the other pieces that come around it. If we look at the accounting work, the legal work, if those all accelerate, that'll be very valuable. I actually saw an example where we're working on our new facility, and we work with a firm that handles the design. And they leverage AI, and they're able to turn around a new design within a few days. So we're able to be much more responsive, much more rapid in finding the right design than we would be otherwise.
Thank you. And Ms. Simmons, I'm curious about the frictions or non in the quantum space and the use of AI to do augmentation in the same kind of way that Mr. Adut spoke about.
Absolutely. You'll hear across many different industries that it allows for a change of work, not just it's an expansion of work, it's a change. We've not reduced headcount accordingly, we've actually accelerated our output. It's not just accelerating our stack, but also we're very excited about what quantum can do to further accelerate AI. So what I'm trying to communicate here is that this is going to be a feedback loop where better computational structure, stuff that's more fit for purpose, is on the horizon, which will change the capabilities yet further. So it's one of these cycles where change is one of the constants of our lives, and we have to remain good at being responsive and adaptive to change. And if anything, it's just allowing our staff to soak into that and compete more on the global setting.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Bardizzi. Monsieur Saint-Marie, 6 minutes.
Mr. Saint-Marie, 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair, and greetings to our witnesses. I'm going to make a comment for Madame Simmons. Thank you so much for your presentation. It really helped me understand. We committee members over the coming months will be dealing with a study about industrial possibilities in the context of quantum computing, and so that helps. But that said, my questions are for the Canadian Council, the Council of Canadian Innovators, Mr. Perry or Mr. Carbonneau. Service Canada has sent out some expectations for the coming years, $2.3 billion for foreign business contracting, and there is no mention of sovereign data. So given that fact, what can be done? I'm going to answer in English, though, because this is a technical matter. There is a technical report that has just been published, Buying What We Build. It's been published to say what we can do with it.
There are things we can do. There's a new Buy Canadian policy in place that I think will be very helpful in moving the needle on this. And our recommendation to the government is that we treat the Canadian content portion in services of the policy as reflective of the innovative and value-add capacity that is added to the economy by companies doing business here and doing business with the government. In particular, we want to see that the Canadian content provisions for services reflect investment in IP, reflect investment in R&D in the country, reflect Canadian control and management, and reflect control of data. So I think if you added those criteria to how bids are assessed, you're going to see a switch to a more sovereign, more innovative, and more value-added digital stack in Canada as part of the public service.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Addo.
Mr. Addo, a large part of the challenge is how governments are going to market their products, something that is not often mentioned. American brands are very well known by consumers. They're familiar with them. But marketing is very important for the lesser-known brands. I believe that we have to be there to make people more familiar with new businesses, and that will allow us to compete better in the arena. But things are moving fast. We have to know the needs. We have to know what the direction is. And in IT, there is a development that is developed by one of the major American players, and then someone will try to acquire that knowledge. But the development is extremely rapid. We want to be able to bid, to meet the requirements. But very often at PSPC, it can be very difficult. So rather than having any type of surprises about these matters, I think that it would be better to familiarize ourselves with other brands as well in Canada and elsewhere. Well, Canada is involved in a policy as similar to the Buy American policy, but it is a commitment on the part of the government. Do you think now we will see change in Canada in terms of buying Canadian and those groups that want to acquire Canadian goods? I say this to all of you. I think it's a very good question. We've only seen 4 months of operation of this new program, and we can see that the government is shifting in the number of contracts that are being let to foreigners. We'll have to wait to see what it looks like in terms of the service side. We'd be very interested to see. My fear, though, is this. If you legislate this too soon, before you learn lessons from it, I think I would like to see how it's going to be rolled out over the coming months and years before there is legislation behind it. Thank you. Well, I think we have to see the results, particularly in the area of IT. With respect to artificial intelligence. To date, we haven't really seen the government deal specifically with it. But for me, procurement is a way of allowing Canadians to compete internationally as well as nationally. And as Canadian businesses mature, we will have even greater success abroad. As has been mentioned, we want to have significant contracts. We want that to be on a Canadian basis for certain products. So now what we're looking to is mature businesses and seeing what the future holds in terms of development. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your answers. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Sir, you probably have a couple of minutes left. You can pass them to Mr. Falk or Mr. Pirelli.
Chair. My question's for Daniel Perry. As you likely know, Jim Basili came to committee on April 30th. When asked about the Liberal government's performance over the last year with AI, Mr. Basili stated that he would score them as did not attend. And further said, you have to understand this is a race and we haven't gotten out of the locker room. What would your grade be for the current government? And do you believe Mr. Basili's comments reflect a broader concern that Canada's falling behind in the global AI race?
It's always hard to go up against Jim, so I'll let Jim speak for himself. I do think we do find ourselves in a real moment and a real challenge here. As I said in my opening remarks, the delay from the government on the AI strategy is putting our firms behind. We are seeing other countries scale faster, innovate faster, and we are falling behind. And this really is a moment for a generational change, not just for our generation, but future generations as well. So once the AI strategy does come out, we are going to have to hit the ground running. Groups like the CCI and others, we are here to champion all Canadian companies to make sure that they can meet the moment, because we have a lot of great talent here. We have a lot of great ideas. We have a lot of great companies, and we really want to make sure that they are in the best position possible. And we believe that the AI strategy will be a good step towards this. We just need to see the details.
Thank you. So adoption remains a challenge, particularly among small and medium-sized businesses. So what are the biggest barriers preventing Canadian firms from integrating AI into their operations today? And what role should the government play in accelerating that adoption?
Government really needs to be on the forefront of this. The government has the tools and the capabilities to be early adopters and to signal to the market that AI is not something that we should be scared of, that it is actually a tool to help our productivity. So the government should be the first customer in the door. They should be the ones looking to be moving forward first, because when private sector sees the government moving, that is a sign, a green light almost to them. So what I would like to see from the government is to be that first customer and finding Canadian companies to work with and provide these solutions, because we have a number of great Canadian companies. We have the privilege of representing 175 of them, but there are many more out there.
Can I add that?
Yep.
Yeah. Just to add one quick thing on top of that, I think you've kind of put your finger on the problem, which is that Canada's economy is structurally extremely reliant on SMEs, which SMEs are great, but our problem actually is that we can't grow these SMEs into larger businesses, right? Like, this is exactly what the challenge of CCI is here to address, is that we want to take people's startups and turn them into like big scale-ups that are competing internationally with the biggest of the biggest. And that's what we struggle to do as a country, because too many of our scale-ups just get bought out and move to the States. And frankly, when we ask our companies, why are you in Canada? Like, why are you here? The answer is never, or almost never, because this is the best place for me to grow my business. It's because they care about the country, they want to stay here, they're invested here, their family's here. But as CCI, we want to get to a point where people are saying, because this is the best place to do it, right? And that's a policy question, not a culture question.
So in addition to what you've already said, do you have any other practical recommendations that government could use to improve Canada's AI ecosystem?
I think a big part of it is the Buy Canada piece, is being the first customers and getting those purchase orders out the door to companies. Because at the end of the day, grants are great, but what really helps businesses is having those contracts. Not only can they go to banks to get better terms, they can also get reassured when they're selling abroad too. Like I said at the beginning, the first question to ask, why is the Canadian government not buying from you? So instead of having to do that awkward dance, they can go out and say confidently, the Canadian government is buying from us, you should as well. So I think that is one of the first steps. I also think it is creating an environment for capital to grow here too, and making it easier to invest.
Thanks so very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Borelli. Mr. Baines, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us in this discussion. We've heard a lot about scaling. I'm going to go to Ms. Simmons actually first. There's been challenges around scaling, for decades, and businesses are when they're looking to expand. Maybe you can shed some light on on how modularity of photonics industrial design appeals to global markets?
It's wonderful. And I think the whole landscape is shifting. We can hit bigger and bigger scales because of the tools that we have. This is now a global marketplace, and Canada can compete. There are glimmers of exactly what was shared by the previous comments. This is a wonderful place to build a business. Almost. We have amazing talent. We have an amazing quality of life, and a competitive spirit that if we double down on can really win. The world wants to buy from Canada. We have a brand that is a competitive place as well to start from. What we do need to do is, and I agree with the other comments raised, we need to buy Canada in a way where it lets the rest of the world buy Canada. One of the programs that's accelerating the entire quantum industry, and we should look to it, and we have looked to it, is the US DARPA QBI program. And I'm so proud of the Canadian response to build a Canadian Quantum Champions program to use those same kinds of instincts, which is to learn from Canadian businesses, buy from Canadian businesses, and put them into the position where they are able to then sell not just to the Canadian government, but other allied nations and beyond. So these programs are getting started, and they're phenomenal.
Ms. Simmons, I'm just going to jump in. You mentioned U.S. So there was a report by Bloomberg indicating that almost half of U.S. data centers planned for this year are expected to be delayed or canceled, largely due to shortage of electrical equipment, transformers, batteries. How will architecture of photonics design be able to manage these kinds of shortages, bottlenecks? And I'll give you, and my next question is to you as well, so maybe if you can expand on that, and then the challenges that exist in scaling AI-ready data centers in Canada, following with that.
I can speak to how quantum will help with a piece of that puzzle. So I will give you a data point which might be difficult. It's an interesting one. It would take more bits than classical bits than there are atoms in the universe than it would to encode 300 qubits. So just from a pure information density, quantum unlocks something that we have never, ever seen before. And moreover, for our architecture, for photonics architecture, it would take less than 30 kilowatts to drive that kind of computing capability. Like, let's just think about what that means, right? So this is what nature uses to compute. And we are going to be leveraging that for humanity's benefit. It does still take some time. We have some work to do, but the energy conversation shifts dramatically on a quantum platform.
Thank you. I'll maybe go to Mr. Perry. In the budget 2025, government announced $1.7 billion to recruit top international researchers. What federal programs or policies could further strengthen recruitment and retention in the AI space in your mind?
We are proud founding members of the Global Talent Stream. That is a program that helps companies bring highly skilled individuals into the country to address very specific challenges that they're having. So I think leveraging programs like that and finding places that we can attract Canadian talent back to Canada. Like I said, we have really great institutions here. I think of the Waterloo region, for instance, as well, with a presence that BlackBerry created, and it really has become a hub for engineering. We see a lot of those graduates go south of the border. A little bit changed just recently, but broadly speaking, we need to find a way to bring them back. So that is creating opportunities for them here to create businesses that allow their businesses to scale here, but also allowing for competitive compensation packages as well, but also just ensuring that we have an environment that entices them to stay here and build their business here.
I'm from British Columbia, so we have a lot of strength in BC in this space, of course. How do federal investments in research infrastructure and talent contribute to what we ultimately want to achieve as the commercialization and the industry success?
Yes, and I think for what we need to do on that front is not just look at the amount of money we're spending, but look at the outcomes. So understanding, going back to the intangible assets, so where is IP being generated, where is it being stored, where is data being stored, how are we building for the economy tomorrow? So we do have a lot of those strong assets, but when they reach the point of scaling and growing, they're leaving Canada. So we need to find opportunities and ways to keep them here. So that is creating a better environment for them to grow.
Thanks, Mr. Baines. Okay, witnesses, thank you very much for availing yourselves to us today. We appreciate your input. Colleagues, this is the end of the fourth week of 4 in a row. We get 2 at home and then 4 or so back. So rest up. We're going to continue this conversation when we return with some other business before us, but I think it's been an incredibly productive month worth of meetings here. Appreciate everybody's collaboration and contributions as always, and look forward to picking this up when we return in a few weeks. Thanks very much to all members of the House of Commons support team as well. Meeting adjourned.
Good luck.
Thank you.